All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lily's Show and Tell series. If you're not familiar with Lily, it stands for Lifelong Information Literacy, and we are a group of librarians and information professionals who work to promote lifelong information literacy, kind of like our name says. Before we begin, I just have a couple of quick housekeeping items. Yes, this session is being recorded, so if you want to share it with people later, or if you have to leave early, don't feel bad. I will send out the recording by the end of the week. While Maurice is talking, feel free to put any questions into the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. I'll make a note of it. That way we don't miss anyone. And let's see here. What else? Finally, if you want to learn more about Lily or do your own series, we still have dates open in the spring for more show and tell. I have my email and my Zoom link. I'll also put it in the chat in just a second. And that way you can email me for more information. Now on to our speaker. Maurice Hines is a librarian, educator, and author. In his latest position at the American University in Cairo, he gained a wealth of experience in teaching a semester-long information literacy course in addition to instructing graduate thesis workshops on note-taking. This spring, he will start as an instruction design librarian at St. Elizabeth University in New Jersey. His degree is in library and information science is from North Carolina Central University, which he obtained in 2016. He also holds a master's degree in teaching Arabic to non-native speakers from Khartoum, Sudan, and has recently completed another master's in Arabic and Islamic studies at the American University in Cairo. He will defend his thesis next week, which I know he will do great. So on to you, Maurice.
Thank you, April. Let's see. So you can already see my screen, right?
Yes, it's your full slide though, so it's not full screen.
Okay. So I'm putting it in full screen now.
Perfect.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to present with Lily. This is actually my second time presenting with Lily. The first time was a few years ago, towards the beginning of the pandemic. I know that can be a blur, so yes, thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to maybe apologize beforehand. I have 3 young kids. they're around here. I've kind of kept them busy. They're eating, and they have their devices and things like that. So hopefully it'll be minimal interruption. So the point of this presentation is really just to sort of take you through my journey with note-taking, Zotero, particularly the Zettelkasten method, and trying to apply it to the Zotero software. And just a little bit about, I'll share a little bit about the background to this, how I sort of arrived at this as well. So really at the heart of what I'm discussing here is, how do we get from this to that? So here on the left, we have someone sitting in front of their computer screen, thinking, pondering. Maybe they have good ideas. Maybe they have something that they know they want to write about. Maybe they have to write about something, but how do you turn it into something tangible that you can sort of bank on, as we see in these in the picture on the right, with books. If you're interested in publications, putting on your graduation garb. How do you get from the level of ideas to the level of scholarship? So I'll just talk a little bit about my personal journey. I guess the first time I was introduced to Zotero was at a workshop at Duke University back when I was still in library school. I know Zotero has been around since 2006, but I didn't really use it before then. And even after 2015, for a couple of years, I didn't really use it. I only used it maybe just to make bibliographies, for papers that I was writing and things like that. And actually in 2018, I started another master's program. I know it seems like I'm sort of collecting master's degrees, but it was part of my benefits of working at American University in Cairo. So I just decided to take advantage of it. And so I started another master's program, and I would just use Zotero for site. And then in 2020, sort of the semester, the infamous spring 2020, I kind of had this idea of a research diary as an assignment for students, sort of as a final assessment, creative project. And actually presented about this at the Lilly conference, I think that summer of 2020. So I don't need to go into too much detail with that, but this is sort of where I started to craft idea or become more interested in note taking and sort of this system of taking notes incrementally in order to get to your final assignment. And it was kind of like showing work, in mathematics, for instance, your teacher always asks you to show your work. So I wanted to look at the work of my students by looking at their research diary. And then in 2021, I kind of stumbled upon this idea of the Zettelkasten note-taking system, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. This idea, I don't know, I guess it was sort of sprung from this research diary. I don't actually remember how I was introduced to the Zettelkasten system, but once I was, and it really changed my life. Sort of intellectually and professionally. And this brings us to spring 2022, in which I was finishing up my thesis, my master's thesis, and I actually started and finished it in 4 months. Which is, I guess, a relatively short time, at least compared to other people in my program. And they were actually kind of surprised that I was able to start and complete it within 4 months. That's how they kind of became curious about my system. And then also in 2022, I began to present some of these graduate workshops on note taking. And kind of like today, I was really surprised by the amount of interest in it. Because I kind of see, note taking is sort of a nerdy thing, something that, is very personal, I guess. Why would anyone, be interested in, how other people take notes? So I was sort of caught off guard, and there was a lot of interest for it. And so this sort of became my claim to fame. So the first part here, I will talk about my Zettelkasten journey. So how did just a little bit about the Zettelkasten system and I guess how I implemented it. So like I said, it kind of goes back to this idea of a research diary. So the research diary, you don't probably remember my first presentation that I did some years ago. So just a brief synopsis of it is that a research diary is a tool that researchers use, and they can use it across disciplines for recording their findings and thoughts as they conduct their research. So I was using this. Oh, So I was using this. Hopefully that students would get to this sort of way of taking notes incrementally in order to minimize their backtracking of citations, the rereading of materials, and so just sort of looking for stuff as they're trying to actually write their papers. And also it allows sort of space to visualize their work and their ideas before they actually write their final research paper. And also research diaries, they lend themselves to digital tools like Google Docs, blogs, and of course, Zotero. Okay, so what is the Zettelkasten method? So I don't expect for everyone to be familiar with it, but apparently it's something that has been gaining in popularity over the years. You can find a lot of YouTube videos and maybe blogs and stuff like that that are written about the Zettelkasten, how people are applying the Zettelkasten nowadays. So the Zettelkasten, it comes from a German word meaning a slip box, and you can see a picture of it over here, or one iteration of it. It was a note-taking system that is accredited to someone named Nicholas Luhmann, who was a German sociologist. And he pretty much had an kind of like the old card catalog in his home, and he created it himself by using he would take notes on these cards, and then he had a system of cross-referencing and sort of labeling them so that he can search them later. I think by the time of his death, there were over maybe 90,000 of these notes. So I saw some overlap here. So in terms of the research diary concept, his note-taking system was interdisciplinary, meaning you can apply it across the disciplines. It records research findings in real time. So as you're reading, you're taking notes. And then it also, he also has a way of tying his notes with certain citations. So that helps you track the citations, limits rereading. So he sort of takes his notes, his thoughts about reading, and he doesn't really have to revisit the book again unless he wants to get something else out of it. And then he's able to visualize his findings. So usually when he wanted to write, he would just gather everything that was sort of cross-referenced, tagged similarly, and just sort of group them together. He would look at them, and then from there he would arrange and sort of write from his notes. And then, of course, now in the digital age, then a lot of this is conducive to digital software. So who was Nicholas Luhmann? So I guess in his lifetime, he was considered a very influential sociologist from Germany. And maybe he was more influential within Germany and within Europe. He was kind of like the Stephen Hawking's of sociology. Apparently he came from very humble means. He was even taken as a prisoner of war by the US during World War II. He was only 17. And then I guess after the war, I think he studied law or something like that. He did study at Harvard for a little while. But he wasn't really well known until he sort of went on and he studied sociology and became a professor of sociology. And one sort of interesting thing, fact about him was that he became a single father at one point. I believe his wife passed away, and it was said he had 5 children. And he was still able to author over 70 books and 400 journal articles on multiple disciplines throughout his life, which I kind of find interesting because I don't know how many of you try to get anything done with children around. It can be a task. I'm not a single father, but I do have my children with me right now. My wife is currently out of town, so it's just me, and I'm hoping they don't get to my notes. You know, they don't make a mess of anything. So yeah, so this is sort of the background of Nicholas Luhmann. So his claim to fame, I guess, is his prolific writing over the course of his career. And whenever people would ask him about it, they would say, he would just say, I owe it to my Zettelkasten, and just sort of brush it off. And so it wasn't really until after his death that people, particularly these German people who studied systems, really sort of looked at his notes and began to sort of codify his system of note taking. And here, to the right, we have a picture of the cover of a book. It's probably one of the first books in the English language that really concisely explains the Zettelkasten method. It's called How to Take Smart Notes by Zanke Arens. And so you see the subtitle here: One Simple Technique to Boost Writing, Learning, and Thinking for Students, Academics, and Nonfiction Book Writers. So what I saw, basically after reading this work, were the basic principles of note-taking, good note-taking in general. And I saw that they overlap a lot with what I was sort of already thinking. So the 4 characteristics here are that their notes should be stored in one place. They should be easily accessible and retrievable. The notes should be connected, perhaps through tags or some system of cross-referencing. And then, of course, they should be properly sourced. So they should include the citation information, page number, anything like that. And when I was reading, I believe this is page 32 of his book, he's talking about the tools that you need in order to start this Zettelkasten method. And he says it's very simple. He said you shouldn't really spend a lot of time, going through different tools. You should use what's easy for you. You should not spend more than 5 minutes really sort of setting up your tool. So one thing he includes here is that you should use a reference management system. Now, yeah, as a librarian, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know what that is. And then below we see that he really recommends Zotero. So Zotero, I've been using for years already. I already have a number of bibliographies in my system. So why not just go ahead and use Zotero? So the functionality there, I do think so, and we'll talk about that in one moment. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about my Zotero journey. Okay, so what is Zotero first? I give this is a link to the Wikipedia page, but also on their website, you see clearly that they market themselves as your personal research assistant. It says Zotero is a free, easy to use tool to help you collect, organize, annotate, cite, and share research. So these are kind of all the things that I'm looking for. So the criteria of the Zettelkasten, that it should be stored in one place. Okay, check. You can store everything in Zotero. It's easily accessible and retrievable. Okay, so Zotero is open source. It's run by a nonprofit. The markdown system is, easily, you can easily transfer to any other program. And also it is connected to some of the major editors, word processing software like Microsoft Word. And then also you can connect your ideas through tags and cross-referencing which we can look at momentarily. And then, of course, it is properly sourced, so it can produce citations for us automatically. So I just sort of reviewed it, and I was able to find that Zotero really sort of fit everything I needed to implement the Zettelkasten system. Before we go to my thesis journey, I want to just show you my Zettelkasten. Let me just stop sharing. And I'll share my Zotero with you. Okay. So here's my Zotero. I believe there's probably over like 2,000 items here. So I have my folders of different classes I took, different things that I've been working on. But the advanced features that I learned to use in order to apply the Zettelkasten system are actually over here, the tags, also to the right. So I noticed that, for the longest, in many librarians, they tend to teach, just this, the citation, how to export the citations and things like that. But I'm looking over here, there's a notes tab, so you can add notes. And not just that, you can even add tags to each of your notes. And then if your note corresponds with something else that you're studying, then you can link them. And then in addition to that, of course, you can tag the actual source, and then you can relate them to other sources. So it sort of creates this web of information that that is specific to what you're studying and what you are trying to explore. And so basically, I just sort of started off reading and making sure that everything that I read was imported in here, and I'm taking notes here. In order for the Zettelkasten to work effectively, you really need to have a critical mass of notes. So, the more you read, the more you take notes, the more efficient it becomes. And then once you're ready to, start writing, then all you really need to do is you can click on your tag, and everything that's related to your topic will sort of pop up here. And basically from there, you can just start, taking those notes and copying them and pasting them into your word processor, and you can start editing them. So let's go back to the slide. Are there any questions right now?
There's not a question, but there is a comment, which I thought was interesting. Rachel said that she uses the independent notes in Zotero to make her Zettels, that she assigns them like a Zettel number at the start of the notes, so it becomes part of the notes title.
Okay, yeah. I think in terms of the Zettelkasten method, he used to use an elaborate numbering system. I'm not that deep, so I just use the tags.
I had a quick question. Do you use the web interface, or do you use the downloaded version for Zotero?
I mostly use the downloaded version, but I do have it linked with synced with my web. web version. At some point in my thesis, my computer broke down, so I needed to use another computer. So that function was very it came in handy because I was able to not really sort of miss a beat with my research.
And then we got 2 more questions. I see Sarah has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for some clarification on the related function. So
Mhm.
you're linking basically a note to another note or a note to another record, or what kinds of things would you link using the related function?
I will primarily link notes to other notes. You can also link them to other records. So it's flexible in that regard. Particularly if you haven't read the other book or whatever, the article, then it comes in handy. Maybe you just know that it overlaps in some way, and so you just have it linked. And I would try to do that as soon as I import a source. I would look for other things that are related to it.
Great, thank you.
All right. We got a few more questions come in.
Uh-huh.
And how are the categories tags developed beforehand, or do you go in as you do your research?
I usually produce it as I do my research, but I think one of the things about the Zettelkasten system is that you realize that ideas start to gather in one area. So sometimes, as I'm researching, I might enter a note, and then I realize that I've already have some other notes that are related to this, or that have a similar tag that I'm interested in using. So that will often be a trigger for me to actually look for that particular tag within my notes. And sometimes, you don't always remember what you what you read or what you wrote down. And so the system becomes a way to help you remember. There are actually a few times where, how do I put it? The tag came from the notes themselves, meaning that I realized there was a particular term or word that occurred in a couple of different notes, and then I would return and sort of tag them with that tag. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's more of a, the tag actually comes out of the note itself rather than me assigning the note a tag from something else that I'm looking at.
All right, so I think the last question for right now is how is the tag feature different than the related feature?
They are similar in certain regards. The related feature sort of requires you to recall where another piece of information is. So you kind of have in mind that, okay, this is found in this book or in this note. However, if you tag it, then sometimes you don't realize that similar ideas are sort of collecting. I think maybe the best way to describe it is that one is I guess more purposeful or is based on your memory, and the other is just sort of random, and you sort of see where the ideas collect in the end. One is proactive, one is sort of retroactive.
And one last more, sorry, we have one came in. Do you have a system for your tags, like an authority file?
No, it's interesting. In the book How to Take Smart Notes, Zanke Arons, he sort of has this conversation about creating tags. He says that you'll quickly tell the difference between a librarian or an archivist versus a researcher, because there's sort of this sort of overarching view that we take, I guess, as librarians. We want to have authority file, and maybe use the tags that are pre-made by the cataloging system. But he actually argues that you should make it more personable. Basically, this is your system. This is your personal system. You don't necessarily want other people to use it. And so when you're creating your tags, create tags that that you'll look for, rather than something like a library.
Thank you. All right, if you'd like to continue.
Okay. Share, sorry. Wrong. Okay. So my thesis journey is sort of part of this whole Zettelkasten thing, and Zotero. So, like I said, I began my thesis I kind of started reading for it in maybe the summer of 2021, but then I didn't really start writing it until spring 2022. So I want to share with you it's a brief video by the author of the book How to Take Smart Notes, Maurice Hines, who sort of wrote the authoritative book on the Zettelkasten method in English. I think before it's always been in German, but he's produced a very simple, easy to read book that explains the Zettelkasten method. And I want to share just maybe about 3 minutes of this talk that he gives on how to take smart notes. I think he makes some very interesting points about how we research, how we teach research, and other things like that. So
approach different kinds of literature. So the difference between using one tool and another tool, if you focus on the workflow it enforces, does make a difference. On the one hand, only written ideas count. And that's especially Richard Feynman said, if you can't explain it in your own words, you haven't really understood it. So it's focused on writing, and it's not just one task among others. And you can invert the whole process of how can you make it easier in for the moment when you are about to write a paper. So it's not you start with coming up with a research question, but well, it isn't difficult to write a paper if you already have all the content sorted on notes right in front of you. All you have to do is write a rough draft about that. Then it isn't difficult to put notes in order if you already have these notes and an index where you can look them up. And you might say, well, then it means that the main work is still to be done, and that is writing these notes. But this main work is not additional work you have to do on top of other things, but that's the outcome of a change in a daily routine of the things you do anyway. So you end up with a huge resource of notes, not by doing additional work, but by changing your routine of your everyday work.
Okay. So I actually think he makes brings up a number of interesting issues in this talk, and I know we just sort of took a very small snippet of it, but I want to sort of bring them out. So one of the things that he discusses in his book, he says, focus on the workflow, not the tool. So I know we're in love with Zotero or whatever tools that we're using. There's actually a fancier software that's out there that a lot of people use to employ the Zettelkasten called Obsidian. I haven't really got the hang of it. I'm not really used to using it, but I know a lot of people they like to use it. It works for them. But you know, one of the main things that he says that, you know, if you have a workflow to do your research, then, you know, you can easily get into a groove, what he calls flow. You know, you can just do something sort of a little bit every day in order for it to compile and create a critical mass of work that you can then use, you know, when you actually want to write. He says here actually that only written ideas count, and in another part of the talk, he says writing is thinking. I think he actually quotes Robert Fieldman, but he's saying that, you know, the more you write, you know, in your notes, the more thinking sort of comes out, and the more you have to sort of pull on when you're sitting in front of your word processor trying to make, you know, an article or any sort of written work. And he also challenges some of the methods of teaching information literacy and research methods. And this is something that, you know, I kind of had to take to heart myself. Someone who teaches information literacy to first year students. You know, oftentimes, of course, we say, you know, you come up with your research question, and then, you know, from the research question, you create search terms, and then from there you look for the literature. You do your literature search. Maybe, you know, there's literature there, maybe it's not. Maybe you have to go back and adjust, you know, your search terms. Maybe you have to go back and adjust your research question. It becomes this sort of circular and, you know, this iterative process where you constantly have to reevaluate things. What he's saying is that there's an easier way to do it. There's an easier way to find a topic, and that is to read about your general topic. Of course, you have a general topic in mind, but you read about it first. You take notes, and then you start to see the things that you're interested in. You start to see gaps. You start to kind of have this expert knowledge about a particular topic. And then from there, you can choose your research. You can choose your research topic or your thesis topic, rather than sort of starting off with this grand idea and then only to sort of, you know, come to these major obstacles where, you know, you have to stop and sort of, oh no, let me take a look at that again, and then restart my topic all over again. And you know, actually in my master's program, I've known several of my colleagues who have done this. You know, they've been in the thesis stage of their degree for the past, you know, year and a half or so, and then, you know, they're constantly changing their topic every 2 weeks. So another point he makes here is that you know, you can have a lifestyle of research by simply changing your daily routine. And I think in the book, just maybe 6 notes a day. 6 notes a day can take you, pretty far, after a week, after a month. And maybe for people who are knowledge workers, that's a more realistic goal, because, producing knowledge, is, how do you say, like maybe at least 50% just sort of sitting there thinking, looking like you're not doing anything. Whereas if you're able to produce some of your thoughts in a written word, even if they're not like completely edited or fancy or anything like that, then you're at least producing your thoughts. You have something tangible that you can take away. Then also he brings up this bottom-up approach, which is what I kind of explained a few minutes ago. This bottom-up approach makes writing easier and less intimidating. I think the idea is that students, when they're asked to write a 10-page paper or a 30-page paper or a thesis that's over 100 pages, it's just very intimidating. How am I going to come up with all those words? How am I going to fill that space? And so students start looking for ways out. They increase the font size, or they include pictures and things like that. Or at the very worst, maybe they're plagiarizing and sort of doing things that are undermining their educational process. So thinking about making writing easier, I think is something that is sort of on my mind. And also this idea of having a plan versus completion. So he says that, there's certain things that you can't plan for. Particularly when you're writing your thesis, you're producing your thesis proposal, is really your research plan. But he said there's a lot of things that you can't sort of foresee, like insight. Maybe you're going to come across something that changes, how you think about the topic altogether. Maybe you'll reevaluate your methodology or something like that. Well, why should you wait until the midst of doing your research to actually switch up, sort of mid range? So that sort of keeps you from completing on time, on the time that on the time scale that you sort of set, or maybe your advisor set, and then maybe just writing is the goal. Like you just want to write and read as much as possible, so that you can just publish on what you read or what you evaluated from the research. And then the final thing is that this removes a lot of the guesswork from literature searches. So oftentimes students come to me, they said they chose this topic. Sometimes they say their professor chose the topic, but they don't know if there's literature on the topic, or they haven't been able to find literature on the topic. And so, we kind of get into this very sort of small space where we're like, okay, well, we have to adjust the search terms, and maybe we're only finding 1 or 2 sources on the topic, and they need more. And so it becomes very frustrating. But if you do it according to this Zettelkasten method, then you'll only be writing about the things that you found literature on, ideally. Okay, and then so in terms of my process for doing my graduate thesis, basically my workflow was just starting with reading, taking notes while reading, tagging my notes, connecting those ideas. But as soon as I input the record, and then periodically reviewing my notes. This is something I would do periodically, because you really need a critical mass of notes, like I said before, in order for this to be effective. So, you're looking at your notes, and maybe there's only 3, 4, that's not enough. So you know where to, do your reading. Now make sure I didn't erase anything. Everything that I wrote down, I kept. Maybe I would use it, in some other capacity. And then writing, when I began to write, I began to write by looking at my notes, looking at my, reviewing my tags, and then copying my notes into Word, just sort of editing them and, rearranging them at that time. And then also during this writing phase, I realized where the gaps in my notes were. So it sort of helped me refeed into my system. So if I found the gap, maybe there's something I need to read about a little bit more, then I go back to reading, I go back to taking notes, I go back to tagging and so on. And I know sometimes there's an urge, maybe as you're writing, let's just, just take from the book and write it directly in the in your paper. But I stuck to my workflow so that, maybe I can use it again, for another project. So I just sort of had the discipline to sort of stick to my workflow. I guess the last part of this is my teaching journey. So, I kind of had 2 roles here at at my previous position. I actually just left American University in Cairo earlier this month, and I'll be starting at St. Elizabeth University the beginning of next month, February. But I was looking back, for the last 4 years since I started that master's program, I kind of had 2 roles. One was as, instruction librarian, and then the other one was as a graduate student. Sort of like an embedded librarian. I would notice certain things from my colleagues within the graduate program that I could use, in my instruction. And then taking notes was really one of those things. So what I did, I just noticed some of these things about my colleagues. They had a lot of problems writing papers. And this is something maybe I should have mentioned before. Once I started using the Zettelkasten system while I was in the graduate program, I noticed that not only was I submitting my papers on time, but I was submitting them early. It was very easy for me to produce a paper about something I've already written about. So ideally, when you're in your graduate program, you're doing readings all the time, and you're writing papers all the time. You're attending class, lectures. I was always there with my Zotero open, entering notes, entering certain things that I found to be interesting. And so when I finally needed to write maybe a 5-page paper, it was very easy for me to do. And so I noticed some of my colleagues struggling. And so I just kind of sent them an email with some of this information about the Zettelkasten method. And I suggested, Zotero. We had some tutorials on our library website that I also sent them. And so, and then I just offered my service as a librarian, not as a colleague in the graduate program. And actually, to my surprise, there was a lot of interest to it. Many people actually didn't realize that they needed this skill. So from there, I started to get invited to do workshops within the program that I was in, and then eventually for the whole university. And then this sort of fed into something that I would actually market um, within the university. And that's kind of where I left off in this position, and hopefully in my new position I'll be doing more of this. So that is pretty much the end of my presentation. I just have a brief survey. I want to improve on this presentation in the future. I would like to give more of it. So this is a brief survey. I can post the link in the chat if you'll allow me to, April.
Absolutely. So we've had a couple of questions come in, if you don't mind. And you've kind of touched on the first one a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyways. So when you're doing your tagging, are you using acronyms and abbreviations or full words?
So I personally like to use full words. It's I don't know. I know a lot of people like to abbreviate, but yeah, I just use full words for the most part. I don't abbreviate because I don't always know what the abbreviation will stand for later.
Yeah, I have that problem too. Are the notes in your own words for the most part, or are you using quotes?
Yeah, so it's always, well, I do use quotes, but even if I use quotes, I put things in my own words. And this is actually something that the Zettelkasten system encourages, to always put things in your own words, because those words will serve as the beginning of your paper. And so as long as you cite where you got the ideas from, if you're citing ideas, or you can also use it to sort of ponder. Maybe there's just something that sort of sparked an idea for you from a particular source. It can be a video, it can be an anything, artwork, anything that you can cite. Then you can sort of take it and then just sort of start writing about it. And it doesn't have to be neat, doesn't have to be polished or anything like that. Just sort of a beginning. It's your notes, your personal notes. So
Okay, so one last question. Could you potentially use the Zettelkasten process in a group project? Because you could do a shared group library in Zotero.
yeah, that was something that I actually always wanted to try. Unfortunately, my first year students aren't really there yet. And plus, the way that, I guess the way that education sometimes is set up, they often sort of force the students to work individually. Whereas we know in the real world, we're often working collaboratively. And I think the fact that Zotero has these group functions, it can help with just better collaborative research. I would say actually there was one thing that it wasn't necessarily a research project, but we were doing actually a Black History Month thing, and we collected some sources together, me and some colleagues, and I was able to tag them and sort of put my expertise to use.
All right. I believe that's the last question. I'm doing one final scan here. We have a lot of really good discussion in the chat. So when I send out the recording, I will also send out the chat. I'll make sure that you get it too, because I think you'll be interested in all the things we were talking about while you were talking about. So that's a good sign. That means we were very interested.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. I'm kind of surprised at the interest, but hopefully we can take this further than just my thoughts in my head.
Yeah. I think it was awesome. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for attending.